The phone shook in her trembling hands as the black maid whispered with a voice breaking from panic. "Sir, please, come home right now. Your wife, your second wife, she's going to kill your son." Her words were rushed, terrified, almost swallowed by the sound of the boy screaming in the background. She didn't cry for her own life, didn't beg for her own safety. She begged because the innocent child was running out of time. "Please, boss, hurry. If you don't come now, it will be too late." And then the phone cut off. Before the story continues, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss powerful stories like this one. The night had been strangely quiet just moments before that call came in. Lorenzo De Luca, one of the most feared mafia bosses in the city, had been sitting in his office, going through files that didn't concern business but hospital records for his 6-year-old son, Milo. The boy had been having nightmares for weeks, clinging to his father every time he visited, and refusing to talk whenever his stepmother, Bianca, walked into the room. Bianca was Lorenzo's second wife, beautiful, charming, and adored by society, but feared by every maid, guard, and servant inside the mansion. Except Lorenzo never saw that side of her. She hid her cruelty behind a perfect smile. Tonight, when Lorenzo's phone rang with the maid's number flashing on the screen, he answered casually, until he heard the terror in her voice. The second she said, "She will kill your son," his heart slammed into his ribs. For a man who never panicked, who never feared bullets or enemies or betrayals, this was the first time his hands shook. Milo was the only soft part of him, the only piece of life he protected with everything he had left. Without waiting another second, Lorenzo stood up so fast the chair crashed behind him. He grabbed his gun, his keys, and sprinted out the door with a roar that echoed through the hallways. The drive back home felt like an endless race against death. Rain hammered the windshield, lightning cracked across the sky like warning signs, and the tires screeched against the wet road as he pushed the car far beyond its limits. Every second felt like a stolen breath. Every scream he imagined his son making stab deeper than any knife ever could. He replayed the maid's voice over and over, her fear, her desperation, and he could feel the truth in her words. Something had been wrong for weeks. Milo had become jumpy, silent, scared of being left alone. And Lorenzo, blinded by trust in his beautiful wife, hadn't seen what was right in front of him. Inside the mansion, chaos had begun long before he arrived. The maid, Talia, stood outside Milo's locked bedroom door, banging and shouting for Bianca to stop whatever she was doing. From inside, the muffled sound of objects hitting walls mixed with the terrified sobs of a child pleading for mercy. "Please, I didn't do anything. I didn't. Please stop." Every word from Milo's mouth broke Talia's heart. She had raised him more than anyone else in the house. She had fed him, comforted him, tucked him in at night when his father was gone. She knew his fears, his dreams, his fragile little heart. And she also knew that Bianca's jealousy had been growing uncontrollably. Bianca wanted a child of her own. She wanted to be the only woman in Lorenzo's life who carried his blood. And Milo, innocent, sweet Milo, was a reminder that he once loved another woman. Tonight, Bianca finally snapped. Talia heard Bianca screaming, "If you weren't here, he would love me more. You ruin everything." Then something crashed loudly, followed by Milo's terrified cry. That was when Talia grabbed her phone with shaking fingers and called the only person who could save him. Lorenzo, the boss, the father, the man who had no idea what monster he had married. As the storm raged outside, Talia kept pounding the door until her hands turned red, praying that Lorenzo would arrive before the unthinkable happened. And at that very moment, his car came to a violent stop outside the mansion gates. Lorenzo didn't wait for the guards to open the gate. He rammed his shoulder against the metal latch, forcing it open just enough to slip inside before sprinting across the courtyard like a man possessed. The rain soaked through his shirt instantly, but he didn't feel a drop of it. All he felt was fear, a rare, unfamiliar fear that tightened like a metal fist around his throat. His shoes splashed through puddles, his breath burned inside his chest, and with every step he whispered one name under his breath. "Milo, Milo, hold on." The mansion loomed in front of him, dark except for a flicker of light coming from the second floor. A scream echoed through the night. A small, terrified scream that didn't belong to any adult. It belonged to his son. Talia heard the front door slam open so hard the walls shook. She spun around with eyes full of tears and relief the moment she saw Lorenzo storming into the hallway, dripping rainwater but radiating a fury she had never seen before. "Sir, upstairs." She locked the door. "She won't stop. Your son." Talia couldn't finish. She choked on the words. But Lorenzo didn't need an explanation. He charged past her, every step echoing like thunder on the grand staircase. His breaths were short, sharp, and animalistic. The mafia boss who could walk calmly into gunfire was now running with fear clawing at his insides. At the top of the stairs, he saw the closed door, Milo's room. Behind it, he heard Bianca's voice twisted with rage. "Stop crying. Stop looking at me like that. You think your father will save you? He doesn't care about you. He only cares about the legacy you destroy." Then something slammed against the wall. Milo screamed again. That scream tore Lorenzo's soul into pieces. He didn't think, didn't hesitate. He kicked the door with all the force in his body. The wood cracked, but didn't give. Another kick. Another. With the fourth kick, the lock broke, and the door burst open. The sight inside froze him for a split second, long enough to burn itself into his memory forever. Bianca stood in the middle of the room with a metal rod in her hand, her hair wild, her eyes red with insanity. Milo was curled in a corner, shaking violently, his tiny arms lifted in defense. The wall behind him had fresh dents, the carpet was torn, and his cheek was already bruised purple. Bianca's chest heaved as she lifted the rod again. "You ruined everything," she screamed. She didn't get to swing it, because Lorenzo was on her in less than a second. He grabbed the rod from her hand and threw it across the room so forcefully it clattered into the opposite wall. His other hand wrapped around her wrist, stopping her like she had hit a brick wall. She gasped, finally realizing who stood in front of her. Lorenzo. Wait, it's not what, but she couldn't finish. Because the look in his eyes froze her entire body. It was a look she had never seen from him, not even toward enemies. A look colder than death. "What did you do to my son?" he growled in a voice so low and dangerous it didn't sound human. Bianca stumbled backward, fear spreading across her face as she searched for words that didn't exist. He provoked me. He lied. Lorenzo didn't let her finish. He stepped past her like she was nothing but a shadow, heading straight to the trembling boy in the corner. Milo lifted his face slowly, tears sliding down his small cheeks. "Daddy," he whispered, voice breaking. That one word shattered Lorenzo. He lifted his son gently, like he was made of glass, and held him against his chest. Milo immediately clung to him, tiny fingers digging into his shirt, sobbing uncontrollably into his shoulder. Lorenzo's hands shook as he examined him. The bruise on the cheek, the small scrape on his arm, the red marks forming on his back. Each mark stabbed Lorenzo deeper than any bullet ever had. He kissed Milo's head, whispering, "It's okay. Daddy's here. No one will hurt you again. I swear." Bianca took a desperate step forward. "Lorenzo, she's lying. The maid set me up. The child," he exaggerates. But Lorenzo turned his head slowly toward her, and Bianca felt her blood turn to ice. "Open your mouth again," he said with a deadly calm, "and you will not leave this house walking." Talia had reached the doorway and stood beside it, shaking as she covered her mouth with her hands. She had seen Lorenzo angry. She had seen him threaten men. She had even heard stories about how ruthless he could be. But this was something else. This was the fury of a father. Bianca's voice trembled. "You can't trust that maid over me. She wants to ruin our marriage. She hates me. I trusted you." Lorenzo cut her off. "I gave you everything, and you raise your hand against my son." His voice cracked, not with weakness, but with a rage so deep it sounded like a storm trying to break free. "You think I won't destroy you for this?" Bianca's legs turned weak. "Lorenzo, please. I love you." "You don't love anything," he replied. "You only love control." Thunder rumbled outside, as if the sky itself responded to his anger. Talia finally stepped forward, tears finally spilling. "Sir, she's been hurting him for weeks. Milo was too scared to tell you. She punished him when you left. Tonight, he spilled juice on her dress, and she snapped." Lorenzo closed his eyes, holding Milo tighter against his chest. "Take him downstairs," he told Talia softly. "Warm blanket. First aid. And don't let him out of your sight." Talia nodded immediately, and took Milo gently from his arms. The boy didn't want to let go of his father, but Lorenzo kissed his forehead and whispered, "I'll be right behind you. Daddy promises." As Talia carried Milo out, Lorenzo turned back to Bianca, and the door slowly closed behind the child. Now the real storm was about to begin. The moment the door closed behind Milo, the air inside the room changed. It thickened, tightened, as if even the walls knew something dangerous was about to unfold. Bianca pressed herself against the far wall, her breath shaky, her hands trembling. She had seen Lorenzo angry before, but never like this. This wasn't the rage of a mafia boss. This was the wrath of a father whose child had been harmed. And that kind of anger was something no one in the world could survive intact. Lorenzo stepped forward slowly, each step precise, controlled, terrifying. His wet shirt clung to his body, rain dripping from his hair and sliding down his face like icy trails. But his eyes were burning. "You touched my son," he said quietly. "You laid your hands on a child. On my child." Bianca swallowed hard, unable to look away. "Lorenzo, I didn't mean." "He pushed me," he talked back. "He lied." "He's 6, Lorenzo growled. "He's a child. The only liar in this room is you." Bianca's chest rose and fell rapidly. "You're believing a maid over your wife? That woman has been poisoning your mind since the day she came. She wants your money, your attention, your respect." She took a shaky step toward him, reaching out as if she could calm a storm with a touch. "Baby, please. You know I love you. I only lost control for a moment. You've been so distant. I've been stressed. I need you. Let's just talk." But Lorenzo didn't move. "Talk," he repeated slowly. "You want to talk? Fine. Let's talk." Bianca let out a breath of shaky relief. Too soon. Because Lorenzo's next words were a low thunder. "Tell me exactly what you did to him." Bianca's voice cracked. I only scared him. I didn't really hurt him. He bruises easily." She stopped when she realized Lorenzo's jaw tightened. She switched tactics instantly. "He disrespects me. He doesn't listen. He hides things. He breaks things on purpose. You're never home, so he thinks he can do anything." Lorenzo stared at her with a shocking calm. "So you beat a 6-year-old child to feel powerful?" His voice was flat, deadly. Bianca's lip trembled. "He needed discipline." "Discipline?" Lorenzo barked, stepping closer. "This is discipline." He pointed toward the dented wall, the broken toys, the torn carpet. "Discipline is teaching, guiding, protecting. What you did is called cruelty, abuse." Bianca's eyes widened. "Lorenzo, please, don't say that. Don't make me sound like a monster. I love him in my own way." "You don't love him at all," Lorenzo said coldly. "You hate him because he reminds you I had a life before you." Bianca's mask cracked. Her voice rose, desperate and raw. "Yes, fine. I hate him." Lorenzo froze, breath stopping for a moment. She kept going, unable to stop herself. "Every time I look at him, I'm reminded that his mother had you first, that he has your heart, that I'm second. I'm always second. You don't see me. You don't love me. You love that boy and the ghost of the woman who gave birth to him." A silence followed. A silence so heavy it could break bones. Lorenzo spoke softly, but the softness was scarier than any shout. "I married you. I gave you my home, my name, my trust. But my son, he is my blood. You were supposed to protect him as your own." Bianca shook her head violently. "I tried, but he always gets in the way. He ruins everything. And if he wasn't here," she stopped. It was too late. Lorenzo's voice dropped into a whisper made of steel. "If he wasn't here, what? What were you planning tonight? What were you about to do?" Bianca's breath hitched. I wasn't going to actually kill him, but you could have." His words cut sharply. "One more hit, one slip, one moment of your insanity, and he would be dead." Bianca broke down crying, dropping to her knees. I'm sorry, Lorenzo. I didn't mean to. Please don't leave me. Don't throw me out. I swear I'll change. I'll get therapy. I'll be better. Please." She crawled toward him, reaching for his leg, clinging to him as if he were the only thing keeping her alive. "I love you. I need you. Don't take everything away." But Lorenzo stepped back, and she collapsed onto the floor. "I already took everything away," he said quietly. "The moment you touched my son, you stopped being my wife." Bianca let out a scream of pure desperation. "No, you can't do this. You can't throw me away like trash." Lorenzo ignored her. He walked to the door, opened it, and signaled the guards with a look they had only seen in the most violent wars of the underworld. 2 guards immediately stepped inside. Bianca screamed again, louder, wilder. "Lorenzo, please. I'm your wife. I stood by you. I stayed loyal. I protected your secrets. Don't do this to me." Lorenzo didn't turn around. "Escort her out. She is never to set foot near my son again." Bianca lunged, but the guards grabbed her arms. She shrieked, kicked, begged, cried, but nothing moved Lorenzo. As they dragged her out of the room, her voice echoed through the mansion like a siren. "Lorenzo, please. I'm sorry. I love you. Don't do this. I made a mistake." Lorenzo's reply was calm, cold, final. "You made a choice, and now you face the consequences." As the guards pulled her down the stairs, her screams faded. The storm outside roared louder. Lorenzo finally let out a long breath, but his heart was still pounding. He wasn't finished. He wasn't relieved. He wasn't okay. Because his son was downstairs, afraid, hurt, shaking. And that was the only thing that mattered now. With slow, heavy steps, Lorenzo walked toward the stairs, ready to face the damage he could never undo. Lorenzo descended the stairs slowly, every step echoing in the vast, storm-lashed mansion. His hands still shook slightly, not from fear, but from a rage that had burned itself into his bones. Milo sat on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket Talia had draped over him, his small body trembling even as he tried to hold back his tears. The little boy's eyes lit up the instant he saw his father, and the fear in them was replaced by a desperate hope. "Daddy," Milo whispered, voice barely audible. Lorenzo knelt in front of him, resting his forehead against his son's. "I'm here now," he murmured. "No one will ever touch you again. I promise." Talia watched quietly from the side, her eyes wet. She had seen many powerful men in her life, but none had ever looked like this. A father's love fused with fury so deep it could burn down a house. "Sir," she said softly, "he's been terrified. He thought she was going to—" "I know," Lorenzo interrupted, his voice low and dangerous, though soft with Milo pressed against him. "I know, but it's over now. You're safe. I'll make sure of it." Milo clung tighter to him, finally letting his sobs break free. "I'm sorry, Daddy," he whispered. "I didn't mean to make her mad." "You didn't do anything wrong," Lorenzo said firmly. "You are my son, and the only person who matters is you. Understand?" Milo nodded quickly, burying his face into his father's chest. Lorenzo felt a wave of relief and guilt collide in him. Relief that his son was alive. Guilt that he had been unaware of the dangers so long. "Talia," he said, turning to the maid. "Make sure he eats. Warm milk, anything he wants. Then let him rest. Don't leave his side tonight." Talia nodded, her hands trembling as she led Milo to the kitchen. Lorenzo followed quietly, watching his son's tiny back. Every bruise, every frightened look, every tear that had fallen that night burned in his memory. He clenched his fists. Bianca, that woman. She had crossed a line. She had attempted to harm his son, the only part of him he truly loved unconditionally. And she would pay for this. He paced the hallway, thinking back over the events of the night. How had he not noticed the subtle signs sooner? Milo's quiet resistance, the little injuries, the fear in his eyes. Bianca had been manipulating everyone, keeping him blind, hiding the truth behind her perfect smile. His second wife, once someone he had trusted implicitly, had revealed her true face tonight, and it was ugly, dangerous, unforgivable. He swore to himself that she would never be allowed near Milo again. She would be removed from the mansion, removed from his life, and removed from the power she thought she held. The sound of the storm outside seemed to echo his thoughts. Rain lashed against the windows like a drumbeat of vengeance, lightning illuminating the grand hall in jagged white flashes. Lorenzo moved toward the study, retrieving the phone from his desk. He dialed a number he rarely used except in emergencies. A deep, commanding voice answered on the other end. "Yes, sir." Lorenzo's tone was sharp, precise. "Prepare a car. We're leaving the mansion immediately. Bianca will not stay another minute in my house. And make sure she's removed safely, no mistakes." "Yes, sir," the voice replied. Lorenzo hung up and turned back toward the hallway. He walked past portraits of himself and Milo, past the reminders of what he had built, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Milo's safety, his family's peace, was paramount. He would protect it at all costs. Meanwhile, Milo sat in the kitchen with Talia, slowly sipping warm milk. His small hands trembled, but his eyes were beginning to regain their light. "Daddy, she's gone?" he asked softly. Talia smiled gently, brushing a damp lock of hair from his forehead. "For now, sweetheart. Your dad made sure she won't hurt you again. You're safe, I promise." Milo nodded, letting himself relax slightly. "I thought she was going to. I thought she was going to hurt me, forever." Talia's heart ached. She squeezed his hands. "No one will ever hurt you again, Milo. Your dad is right. You're safe." Outside the mansion, Bianca struggled against the guards. She screamed, yelled, tried to bargain, but Lorenzo had ensured no one would listen to her. Every word she shouted fell flat against the storm's fury and the authority of the man who had built an empire on fear and respect. And tonight, that same man was protecting the one person in the world he loved more than anything. The guards finally managed to secure her in a car, and with Lorenzo's final instructions, she would be removed from the city entirely. She would have no power, no influence, no opportunity to harm his son again. As the vehicle carrying Bianca drove away into the storm, Lorenzo returned to the mansion. He entered the kitchen quietly, kneeling next to Milo once more. "It's over now," he said. "She won't be back. Nothing will happen to you. I promise you, nothing." Milo's small face lit up with the faintest smile, and for a moment, the tension melted. But Lorenzo knew this night would leave marks. Milo would remember the fear, the terror, the helplessness. He needed to be patient, gentle, and constant. He needed to rebuild Milo's trust, his sense of security, from the ground up. Lorenzo sat with his son for hours, talking softly, telling stories, assuring him that he was loved, that he was safe. And as Milo finally drifted to sleep, exhausted but comforted, Lorenzo allowed himself to breathe. He had survived battles, betrayals, and wars of the underworld. But nothing had tested him like tonight. And yet, he had come through. Milo was safe, alive, and for now, that was all that mattered. But Lorenzo knew one thing. Bianca had shown her true face tonight. And anyone who dared to harm his family, anyone, would meet the full force of Lorenzo De Luca's wrath. He would protect what was his with every ounce of power he possessed. And for the first time in his life, the full weight of being a father, not just a boss, not just a man, but a protector, had settled on his shoulders. It was terrifying, exhausting, and yet, it was the only thing that mattered. Milo was safe, and Lorenzo would ensure he stayed that way, no matter the cost. Morning came slowly to the De Luca mansion. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside slick and quiet, but inside, a heavy calm lingered. Lorenzo sat in the grand living room, Milo nestled against his chest, still asleep. The night's terror had left traces, dark circles under the boy's eyes, tiny bruises fading on his skin, and the lingering tremor of fear. Lorenzo brushed Milo's hair gently, whispering softly, "You're safe now, my son. Nothing will ever hurt you again." The little boy stirred, murmuring sleepily, "Daddy, you saved me." Lorenzo kissed the top of his head. "Always," he said. "I promise, always." Talia watched from the doorway, her eyes soft with relief. She had been with Milo every moment since Bianca had been removed, tending to his needs, comforting him, and ensuring he knew he was loved and safe. Lorenzo's gaze swept over her briefly, a silent thank you passing between them. The storm of the night had not just tested him as a father, but also reminded him of the loyalty and courage of those who truly cared for his family. Talia had risked everything to call him and warn him, and for that, he would be forever grateful. But Lorenzo's mind was already working, planning, calculating. Bianca's betrayal had been clear, her intentions unmistakable. She would never again be allowed near Milo, and Lorenzo would ensure her removal was permanent. He would make sure she had no influence, no power, no access. The idea of her ever returning, ever threatening his family again, was impossible. The walls of the mansion, the streets of the city, and even his own private network would be used to protect what mattered most, his son. Hours passed, and Milo began to regain his usual energy. Breakfast was served by Talia, and while the child's appetite was light, the smile returning to his face was the most important sign for Lorenzo. The house seemed lighter somehow, though the tension lingered like a shadow at the edges. He knew healing would take time, but he was determined to be patient. Milo needed reassurance, consistency, and the unshakable knowledge that his father was always there. Lorenzo would be more than a boss, more than a man feared by many. He would be a protector, a father first, before anything else. By midday, the mansion had returned to an uneasy normalcy. The guards reported that Bianca had been taken far outside the city limits, placed under watch, and stripped of any access to the DeLuca fortune. She could scream, plead, or manipulate, but it was no longer relevant. Lorenzo's family, his son, his home, these were untouchable. And as he watched Milo play quietly under Talia's supervision, Lorenzo felt a rare emotion, satisfaction. Not the satisfaction of wealth or power, but of a night survived, a child saved, and a wrong righted. There was a deep sense of peace settling in his chest, but it was tempered by the knowledge that vigilance would always be required. Bianca had shown her true nature, and the world was full of people just as dangerous, just as cunning. But nothing would ever compromise Milo's safety again. As the evening approached, Lorenzo took a moment to walk through the mansion alone. Each room held memories, some of joy, some of fear, and some now shadowed by the events of the night. Yet, there was also clarity. Bianca's betrayal had been a lesson, a sharp reminder of what was most important. Love alone did not protect. Power alone did not protect. Only presence, action, and relentless vigilance could ensure the safety of the people who mattered most. And Lorenzo was prepared to do whatever it took. He would never allow anyone to threaten his family again. Not Bianca, not enemies, not anyone. Night fell once more, this time quiet and calm. Milo slept soundly in his room, Talia resting nearby. Lorenzo sat outside on the veranda, the city lights twinkling beneath him, rain freshly washed from the streets. He lit a cigarette and inhaled deeply, exhaling slowly. The events of the night replayed in his mind, each moment sharp, vivid, a reminder of the fragility of life and the strength of resolve. He knew the world could be cruel, unpredictable, and dangerous, but he also knew that love, fierce and protective, was a power that could surpass even fear itself. Finally, Lorenzo stood, looking up at the stars. He whispered a vow into the night air, not for anyone else to hear, but for himself. No one will ever hurt my son again. No one will threaten this family. I will protect him with everything I am. And anyone who dares, he paused, letting the words linger in the darkness, will face me. And with that, he returned inside, closing the door to the night behind him. The storm had passed, Bianca was gone, and Milo's safety was secured. The mansion, though scarred by the chaos, was now a fortress of protection, and Lorenzo knew one undeniable truth. He was ready for anything. Because from this night forward, his son's life, his family, and his love would always come first. Nothing else mattered. Nothing else would ever come close. And for the first time since the night had begun, Lorenzo allowed himself to feel hope, a steady, unshakable hope that despite the darkness, his family would endure, survive, and thrive.